All right, guys, Mike and Derek here, America's New Clothes.
Morning or afternoon.
afternoon, morning, wherever you are, wherever you're checking us out. So we know what they want you to believe, right? We've been hearing for how long that Trump was the beneficiary of Russian collusion that helped him get elected, and that somehow he is Putin's puppet, right? We've been hearing this for the entire presidency.
Since 2015, yeah.
Since 2015. Here we are, we're looking at it. First question, how do Trump's policies actually benefit Russia? He's made us energy independent. That hurts Russia. As gas prices have gone down everywhere except California, that hurts Russia. When we go head to head with him in Syria, when he's backing Assad and we don't get drawn in based on this chemical warfare nonsense, that hurts Russia. Right. We cannot find any liberal who will tell us how Trump's policies are actually benefiting Russia.
Right. Well, so, and the sanctions as well against Russia.
Economic sanctions. Yep.
Yep.
So what is this? Is this merely projection? So the what we're trying to focus on for this little episode is looking at how that projection of corruption actually manifests itself in a neighboring former province of the Soviet Union, the Ukraine, right? So Derek discovered a very interesting blog piece that we just tweeted out, which offers a lot of color, because we've been hearing about Burisma, we've been hearing about Joe Biden fired the prosecutor, we've been hearing all these things, but I think what people need to see is what is the corruption that underlies all of these allegations. You know, why do we care that Kerry and Biden's sons are doing business in the Ukraine? Why do we care?
Right. Well, and again, I think it's important to start off with what we know, right? Which is we know that Trump was impeached for a phone call that he had that was a supposed quid pro quo, depending on what side of the aisle you're on, you hear it differently. That obviously led in July of 2019. That obviously led to his impeachment proceedings. Then obviously he gets impeached December, January. What we find out is that during that same time, or during his presidency, Biden goes on camera and says, basically issues a quid pro. What he said was a quid pro quo that, hey, you fire this prosecutor or you're not getting your $1 billion loan guarantee. Right. Son of a gun, right? He used a different word, but son of a gun, he gets fired. So during that time, obviously Hunter Biden is on the board of Burisma, making the $83,000 a month, whatever. So
no experience in natural gas,
no experience in energy. Yep. Yeah. So that's what we know, right? And the questions, of course, from the right side of the aisle was, why is he on this board? Why is he making this money? Why is he getting $1.5 million and other bonuses or whatever it was? And how does that then tie back to Joe Biden, right? I mean, are they using their name as influence? Of course, everybody says Trump uses his name for influence, and so all the kids are supposedly, doing all this other business in other countries because of their name. So, but that's all that we know at this point. So then it was speculation. Correct. Projection. So that's what we know at this point. So again, going to your point on how does Trump fit into Russia's Putin's pocket? None of it seems to make sense. I mean, he's putting sanctions on them. He's making us independent, energy independent, like you said. He's telling Germany, if you're going to start buying natural gas from Russia, then we're not going to support you, right? So we're going to start pulling back funding to the EU, everything else. So that doesn't help Russia really at all, whatever, right? I mean, they're going to be getting their gas from somebody. But so what's interesting about this article that came up, or this blog piece by this guy's name's, I don't know how to say his name, but looks like it's Predrag Popovich, is okay. And so in that article, it's a fairly long blog post, and he's English is definitely a second language, but what you can make out in there is what it appears to have happened was that back in 2012 and 2013, Ukraine was getting their gas from Russia, but an agreement was made with a company called Naftogaz. Is the money or the energy, the gas would flow through Ukraine, all the way through Ukraine, leave the country by about a kilometer, and then now it's considered EU gas, and then would come back into Ukraine. Now, people would say, well, all right, what's it matter, right? They're getting their gas. Well, the difference is that gas from coming from the EU cost 50 US dollars per cubic meter more. So the Ukrainian people were paying more for energy than they should have if it was just coming in straight in from Russia and they had their gas.
Right.
So then the question,
but more important than that, right, is that we use the Ukrainians people's sense of national pride on their sovereignty from Russia.
Correct.
We used that. We said you shouldn't be buying gas from Russia.
Right.
You should be buying gas from the EU, and we just happen to be the one that we're able to sit there in that spread and take a little piece off the top, right? I mean,
right.
That's the key element, is that we were part of that transaction, or not.
Correct.
By saying we, I mean Burisma and these Naftogaz companies that were operating the spread.
Right. Exactly. And Burisma is involved in that. So what he alludes to is that there was during this entire time frame that this was happening, that about $1.5 billion extra was paid by the Ukrainian people for their natural gas that obviously would have saved $1.5 billion if it just came in from Russia. So what he does a good job of doing is going through and tying all the parties together, and really laying it out. He really makes a good, compelling case. And some of this stuff we'd already known with Burisma and that type of thing, but and the timing involved. But what he also does is he shows the different entities that were involved that were shell companies. And those shell companies were either Ukrainian, EU, or USA. So what he then does is goes through to tie to the Bidens. There's a guy named Amos Hochstein. He was on the supervisory board. Amos worked very closely with VP Joe Biden. Hochstein says, and I quote, "I was in almost every single meeting that Vice President Biden had with President Poroshenko. I was on every trip, and I was on most of the phone calls." That's what he said. Now, if you then go back and start looking at the quid pro quo that was made of, hey, fire this guy, this prosecutor, with what was the prosecutor's name that got fired again?
Viktor Shokin was the leader.
Yeah, Viktor Shokin.
Looking into, because Poroshenko was president of the Ukraine up through 2019.
Correct.
Right?
Yep.
So right. And Poroshenko had made tons of money he was basically the Willy Wonka of the Ukraine. He
right.
made his money as a chocolatier and owning a piece of the national bank.
Right.
So
yeah.
So and the Ukrainian people wanted to suss out corruption.
Absolutely. Which is why they ended up voting for
Zelensky.
Zelensky. I don't know why I keep forgetting his name. Was Zelensky
from a Willy Wonka to a comedian?
A comedian, yeah. Imagine that. But so when Biden says fire this guy, right, for looking into this corruption, now the world is, and I was just watching a thing this weekend saying, well, that prosecutor was fired because every country in the world wanted him fired because he wasn't looking into corruption. Supposedly, that's their spin. That's been debunked. I think John Solomon went through and said that is just not the case. I've got the records here to show all this. But so if he gets this guy fired, who was looking into the corruption from Burisma and the money that was transferring through, there's a guy also on this that was donating money to, he was tied into American politics, a guy named Victor, he's got a middle name I can't pronounce,
Pinchuk.
but Victor Pinchuk, right?
Yeah.
And so through the Pinchuk Foundation, he owned numerous banks and companies over there too, with ties to natural gas, the energy stuff as well. And he became one of the richest oligarchs in Ukraine. In 2015, he financed the presidential campaign of Hillary Clinton to the tune of $29 million. So the money that he was making off the Ukrainian people by having the gas leave Russia, go through Ukraine into the EU to come back, the money that he was able to make and skim off the top, he made sure to send some of that money back to the Clintons. Now, why would you donate $29 million to the Clinton Foundation unless there was something you were going to be getting in that, right? So he goes through and does a fairly good job of tying, a lot of the, I don't want to say the U.S. officials, right, to this scheme. He's merely highlighting the scheme, naming some of the people who were involved, and then almost kind of leading you to kind of do your own homework a little bit. But the Hillary Clinton Foundation did confirm that they did receive that money from Pinchot Foundation. So if you now say, all right, Hunter Biden is on the board getting his money he's making per month, Joe Biden gets the prosecutor fired who was looking into the corruption of Burisma.
Right.
And when Poroshenko leaves, right, the new president comes in and says, and he ran on an anti-corruption campaign platform, just like Trump did. So
right.
Now he's starting to look into it. Then that's when all of a sudden the call comes up. Well, first, let's go back to the impeachment stuff as well. And Yovanovitch, the ambassador, began blocking visas from Ukrainian officials from coming to the United States who had information on the corruption that the Obama administration was doing. Obama, Biden, the Clintons, whatever as well, John Kerry. So he comes in, wants to have a meeting. That's what set up the supposed phone call that got Trump impeached. He was having the call. He wanted the corruption gone before he would send money and military aid to them. He wanted to make sure it was all cleaned up. So yes, someone can tie it and say, well, he wanted dirt on Joe Biden and Hunter Biden. And he does mention on the call, right, that there was corruption going on, and he knows about it and knows that they've been looking into it. So why don't you look into it more? Now, the other thing that we found out as well, last week we touched on it a little bit with video from these Chinese dissidents, is that gentleman mentioned on that call that China is also tied into the Ukraine, and that it wasn't $1.5 billion, it was $4.5 billion. Now, we know that the scheme was to sell futures, right, on that gas, make the money on the skiff there as well. So what will be interesting to find out is the question is, did Hunter's and Devin Archer's hedge fund that they opened, that they got $1.5 billion funding for in China, was it produced or given to them on some type of promise or part of the scheme that they would be underwriting this to then get the money? So they're getting, So that's what will be interesting to see if how all this ties out. Because China's involved.
The Ukrainian people are pissed.
Correct.
As they should be, because they've overpaid $1.5 billion for natural gas over the last few years. And that spread has in part gone to United States senators.
Correct. Yeah.
Or ex-VPs.
And $29 million to the Clinton Foundation. And we don't know if there was any money given to the Biden campaign, since all this happened, pre-Joe Biden announcing he was going to run. But what was interesting, point you brought up earlier, is that Hunter Biden resigned from the board, just 4 days or something after Joe Biden entered the race. So,
fundamentally, they knew that this was not going to get cleaned up cleanly.
Correct. Yeah. And they needed to get him out of there.
They knew that this was a Joe Biden campaign. So the timing of his Burisma resignation is pretty much shows culpability.
Correct. And then we have the phone calls that were leaked, right, by somebody in Ukraine, whether it be the current president or the current prosecutor or whatever, that has Biden on the phone call with Poroshenko, and they're talking back and forth. And, you can make your own assumptions there as well as what was being talked about or alluded to.
That to me is what I find so unconscionable, is that, I shared that phone call has been up. First of all, it was played during a press conference from the Ukraine.
Correct.
Biden's subpoena in the Ukraine. We have a very clear set of prosecutors in the Ukraine who have already showed, look at this phone call between Biden and Poroshenko. Right. Look at this phone call where also John Kerry's on the line, and they're pressuring for the state action. when you see those things, in my mind, when I heard the Poroshenko Biden Kerry phone calls, I thought to myself, there's no way this guy can be president. There's no way Biden can be president of our country. That is damn enough. I shared with a few people who were just like, yeah, how is it possible that they're still going to bat for this guy? And that was long before the Democratic primary. I mean, if you're putting up a candidate with that kind of Achilles heel, prepare for the truth to come out.
Right.
It's indefensible.
Yeah.
It's indefensible.
Well, it is, unless you control what? The media and the intelligence agencies, right? We now know that Hunter Biden's laptop was subpoenaed, right? It was provided to the FBI in December of 2019. They then subpoenaed the guy that was the owner of the company who gave him the laptop.
Right.
There's rumors as to whether or not they were told, hey, you don't say anything, everything's going to be okay. Right. That he, I guess, said to Rudy Giuliani, that's what was said to him. So if you now control, so you got Christopher Wray allowing an impeachment to go through when he knew he had evidence that showed that the real corruption was between Hunter Biden, Joe Biden, and Ukraine. And Chris Wray sat on this information. He sat on this evidence, which is what's led now Ron Johnson to trying to get a subpoena out of him, or not subpoena, send him a letter to get questions answered that then may ultimately end up being with a subpoena, but they're just going to try to run out the clock. There was reports that I think the FBI was going to try to make some statement to the Senate Intel Committee within the next 48 hours. So either today or by the end of day tomorrow. So we'll see if that comes out or not. But if you control the media, which we know is in the tank for Joe Biden, I mean, they're censoring everybody. I mean, we can't even get advertising because we talked about politics in one of our shows, right? So we can't even get our podcast out. And then two, if you control the intelligence agencies, which are the ones that are supposed to be investigating, which brings in all honesty, it brings in A.G. Barr. Is A.G. Barr complicit in this, right? Is he covering? Did he not want this to come out as well? Now, he can say, well, I didn't want to play politics with it, but you just let your president, the person that hired you, brought you in, you just let him get impeached for something that you knew was corrupt.
Right.
Right. You knew the whole process was corrupt if you were sitting on this laptop since December.
We had to endure an impeachment process that they knew Trump was exonerated from, had the right to ask questions. And if they want to say that this is now the political election season, it's the wrong time to make action.
Right.
Well, they've had it for a year.
Right. Exactly.
They've had it for a year.
And so
a year ago, you could have replaced the Democratic nominee with somebody who doesn't have 47 years of corruption in Washington.
Yep.
So
and Trump,
it's all fair game.
And so Trump gets impeached for what Hunter Biden and Joe Biden did. That's interesting, right? If you think about it, right?
So the projection of corruption. I mean, the idea that the blow somehow will be softened when it boomerangs back to you.
Right.
If you are the first one to accuse the other guy of that which you are doing.
Right.
Why are we seeing these mirrors happen so frequently? I mean, why are we seeing in all of the Democratic Party processes this finger pointed?
Right.
And when the truth comes out, in fact, they're the ones that were following that line of corruption.
Right.
So it's fascinating to me. And well, something we were talking about before the show is, the latest stake is that, okay, well, Trump has $420 million in loans and we don't know who it is. And it's probably Russia. This idea that somehow having a loan asset that you're servicing debt on is something that's going to make you beholden to a foreign government like Russia. Far from it, right? I mean, if somebody wanted to call their loan, Trump could easily find somebody else to underwrite that loan because he's servicing the debt.
Right.
But in this case, if your sons are profiting and you're padding your own pockets with a very tricky little scheme that involves energy futures, natural gas over in the Ukraine.
Right.
That is something where you certainly are going to be pursuing policies with regards to Russia, with regards to China, and with regards to Ukraine that are not in the interest of the United States.
Correct.
So,
and
back at you.
And further is that we know the Treasury Department flagged payments coming into Hunter Biden under Obama and Obama's administration, the Latvian government said the same thing. They flagged payments. They sent it to the State Department, the Treasury Department as well, right? They supposedly were looked into. What happened to those, right? If they're flagging them, something was going on. So there was questions already, and that's public knowledge. You can go online and find that, right? I mean, Obama administration knew and even had said, hey, this is kind of shady. We need to, maybe we need to cut it out. And Joe said no, right? His son's on the board. And I mean, I don't understand how your son wins an award. You're standing right behind him, right, for a business thing. And he claims that he never talks to his son about business. I mean, that's just an outright lie. I mean, then he just is a terrible father, or he's lying. I mean, luckily my father's still alive. I talk to him about business all the time, right? I mean, he was instrumental in me getting started or whatever. I talk to him about stuff. He knows what I'm doing. Does he know everything I'm into? No, but I can guarantee you, if I was sitting on a board of a company, he'd know it. And if I was using my name to get onto that board, and that he had a prosecutor looking into that company fired, I can guarantee you I talk with him about that, right? I mean, that's just, it defies logic to think like that. So, but so if Latvia is involved, Kazakhstan now is involved, right? China, Russia, Kazakhstan, Latvia, Ukraine. It's just, I mean, it's just getting more and more with regards to a guy who's has no energy experience whatsoever, had never raised money, right? He was an attorney, I think, by background. So here's a guy who's never owned an equity company, never worked in investment banking, never worked in energy, goes out, gets $1.5 billion to start a hedge fund from China, and becomes a board member of the biggest natural gas and energy company in all of Ukraine, and has nefarious dealings then going on with Russia. Why is he getting $3.5 million from the oligarch's wife, former mayor in Moscow? I mean, it's all of this is seedy. The press isn't covering it because obviously it paints Biden in a bad light. And why does Biden take a 5-day lid? He's not coming out and speaking until the debate on Thursday night.
And not only that, they've changed the topic of the debate to no longer be talking about international politics.
Right. No foreign policy on the
fear factor that maybe some of this stuff will get brought up.
Right. Well, Trump's going to bring it up, obviously. But
it's such a disservice to the American people. I can only imagine that people are going to be really pissed who don't. I mean, regardless of what your thoughts are on how the government should be run and how the spoils of our tax dollars should be spent.
Right.
I think we all have to agree that corruption's no bueno, and this is unconscionable. And what's more disgusting is that as Trump supporters, we've had to endure endless litany of allegations,
right,
since even before the election, which in fact have all really only boomerang to show the corruption with
again. Well, exactly. And if you think about what Trump has said all along, I was wiretapped. That's shown to be true. Not the literal wiretap as we historically have always known it, but he was spied on. That came true. Right. He said the corruption was with Ukraine and Hunter Biden. We now know that I mean, we're tying the documents together. We've had the emails verified, right? So now it's him. It's Hunter, not Trump. It's like anything he says that they're guilty of, which is what makes me think that these hard drives he clearly knew about prior to the first debate. Because when he said, Joe, we have it on camera, right? We have everything. Clearly he knew. And it brings up another thing that I think you and I were talking about this weekend. Steve Bannon. Steve Bannon gets raided, right, and subpoenaed by the FBI for hard drives, and specifically mentioned was hard drives. We now know Steve Bannon and Rudy Giuliani is the one who broke this information. So the FBI knew he had it. Now, who was doing the dirty work for China or for the Bidens to go target Steve Bannon, right? It raises another question. It's like, why is Steve Bannon getting raided? Yes, he had just but just had a speech with a guy who was a pro-Hong Kong dissident and anti-China. So then, and that supposedly is when these hard drives, as people are starting to put the timeline together, make sense, because then right after that, he gets raided. And so China supposedly has told the Democrats, you better win this election or it's all coming out. And so we're all cooked. So that's why you look at all the stuff that the Democrats have been doing all along with the impeachment stuff. They're just keeping their foot on the pedal to then say early voting, get out and early vote, mail-in votes, flood the systems, create so much chaos. They have to, and the court system, what the courts are deciding on. Like, they're trying to do everything they can to win this election because they know they're not going to win it at the polls, in my opinion. I think that when you have to doctor polls to oversample Democrats so much and show that only 76% are going to come out and support Donald Trump, that's ludicrous. So you just look at all the data points. It doesn't make any sense. So Democrats are in desperation mode. It's going to get worse. So I fully expect there's going to be more breaking information or breaking news, obviously. And Democrats are going to be, I mean, they're going to pull out everything. They always have fallen back to the Russia collusion, Russia disinformation. This is coming from Kremlin. Like, it's all been, all the stuff that you use, that cry wolf thing that ties Trump to Russia, all was proven false. Mueller report, impeachment. I mean, nobody that watched that impeachment trial with an honest mind said, okay, he's guilty. Nobody. So everything that again, it's like you say, right? It's like everything that we accuse you of, I'm doing myself, right? So
that's a tactic, right? That's in Saul Alinsky's book,
right?
The Rules for Radicals.
Rules for Radicals. I mean,
it's a tactic because it feels like it's just a reversal when they come back at you with
right.
Oh, I'm familiar. I've heard this before. Trump was accused of that by the other guy. Oh, and now he's flipping it back on them. It couldn't be.
Well, it's like the wrap up.
Right.
It's like the wrap up smear that Nancy Pelosi is famously on camera talking about. Right. You plant something in the media. Right. You smear them. You plant something in the media. The media prints it. Now you can say, see, CNN printed it or New York Times printed it. So it's got to be true. That's called the wrap up smear. I mean, she was so happy to be talking about that day for whatever stupid reason. Right. She's just basically incriminating herself. But I think tomorrow, I mean, we can obviously go on this a little bit more, maybe tie more of China or our next podcast, simulcast, whenever we do it, and tie more of the China stuff together or whatever as well, with Ukraine.
We've got to find out what the blackmail is, right? From a China standpoint, if it's as egregious as everybody is saying.
Right. Oh, geez.
And that's supposed to happen within the next 48 hours. So we'll have a reaction to that. And if people get to see that, then the question becomes, and maybe this is how they'll spin it. Well, blackmail only works when there's something hidden that I'm going to show the world about you. And if you do what I say, it won't come out. Well, if it comes out, does that mean, is the liberal media going to try to spin the fact that, well, now that the dirt on Hunter has come out, does that mean that Biden is no longer beholden to China and can do his job for a sovereign nation?
Yeah. Well, another key point as well is, again, going back to Hunter Biden's business partners, Devin Archer and Bevan Cooney, or is it Cooney or Kuby? Bevan Cooney, I think.
Yeah.
Bevan's the one now that's turned over his emails, right? His Gmail account and 26,000 emails or whatever to Rudy or not Rudy, Lee Smith. Was it Lee Smith and somebody else, right? Anyway, is Devin Archer so he was convicted, federal crime, convicted in 2018. So both of them got convicted. Devin Archer's case was heard on appeal and was thrown out. So his sentence was wiped out. He was released. That judge is married to a person who was one of the key investigators on the Mueller report, who is also tied to the Clintons and the Bidens and the Kerrys. Those three are all being implicated as being part of the Burisma and the Ukraine stuff. So that just so happens, I don't believe in coincidences, but if you do, just coincidentally, that judge happened to suspend his sentence and let him out of jail. You can't make this up, man. I mean, you just can't make it up. And I can guarantee you that most people do not know that fact.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you what strikes me as odd is in a country that they're trying to ban fracking, and it cost Pennsylvania a good 10,000 to 15,000 jobs.
Right.
We've got all these Democratic politicians, kids, working on natural gas.
Natural gas, right.
Which, how do you get it?
Right. Exactly. Right.
It just the irony is thick, and you really got to ask yourself, am I buying any of this?
Right. Well, it's the irony of that, but guess what they do if they frack in other countries? They get to jack the price up because they end fracking here. And guess what we have to do? Import natural gas. right? They get rich off of it. We pay for it, right? We lose jobs. I mean, I mean, connecting the dots. I'm hoping that more people are connecting the dots on their own and they don't need us, but hopefully they do need us, or we're not doing this. So,
well, hopefully we colored it up a little bit and we gave it a little bit of a story. But please share this if you guys liked it. Trying to keep these shorter. Don't want to waste anybody's time, but anything you find that we haven't found, send it our way. Because knows the media is not reporting any of this stuff.
That's right. We're exposing the media. Right.
That's
We're not telling you. And so
showing you the news, the naked truth.
Right.
All right. Until next time. Hopefully tomorrow. We got 20 days to bang out a whole lot of these things.
Actually, what, 16 days now.
16 days. Let's keep
the momentum going.
On the grindstone. Let's rock it.
All right, man.
All right, guys. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks, everyone.